Hello everyone. So basically we're going to quickly run over the JavaScript task that was given out about a week or so ago, and one of the possible ways or some of the possible ways you can solve this task. So there are basically four things you're supposed to do. First, store your name in a variable, store your courses in an array, then display your name and courses, and do one of the following. The first thing is to display all the odd numbers from 1 to 200 if the number of courses you're doing is odd, and then do the same thing all even numbers from 1 to 200 if the number of courses you're doing is even. So inclusive here, inclusive basically means, for example, if you're doing an odd number of courses and you're trying to display all odd numbers from 100 to 200, 1 is an odd number, so you're going to include 1. Like, you won't start from 3. So that's why I said inclusive. For even numbers, 200 is an even number, so if you're going to display all the even numbers from 1 to 200, you would also be required to include 200. That's just what inclusive means. All numbers included. So we'll start this out. I remember when we did the class, the introductory class on JavaScript. Basically, we worked on console DevTools. We used DevTools on our browser and we worked on the console. But here we're going to start out with, we're going to start working locally. We're going to create a file, save it, and then we would view on the browser. So first, I have VS Code open, and there's nothing. This is just an empty folder that's open. It's called start.ng. You can call it whatever you want. And here I'm going to create a file, index.html. So I'm calling this HTML because basically JavaScript, what you're going to write, the code you're writing is running as a script, right? You would still need to somehow put it in your HTML. That wasn't required for the task actually, but since I want to also show the things that we're doing, it's much easier for me to do this way. Of course, you can also go directly to your browser, do it on console, do everything there, and it's still going to work out fine. Right, so I'm using a snippet here to just quickly create a basic structure, and I'm not going to talk much about the HTML structure because, well, we have a separate course for that, HTML CSS. So here we're just going to focus on the JavaScript, and here we're going to do something simple. Console log this works. So let's just be sure this actually works as expected. So this file, this is saved as index.html, and I'll just open that quickly. In my browser. So of course, since the HTML is actually empty, nothing shows, it's a blank page. But if you open DevTools, right, then we should see what we log to the console. This works, right? So with this we can tell that, okay, everything works as expected. We talked about DevTools in the introductory class as well, developer tools, and basically what we're interested in here is just the console tab. So everything we're going to run locally here, we're expecting to see some sort of output here. So when the task said display, right, it didn't mean you actually need to display it here on this on your, like, as a regular page, because I mean this was just a JavaScript task. So displaying this on the console is what I was referring to, and if you can do this much, yeah, that's fine. Some people also used actually displayed on their, like, as a HTML on the browser, the document.write, inner HTML, and all of that. Also fine. Display was ambiguous, so basically as long as I can see it in some way, then that works. So first we'll talk about comments. I didn't talk about comments before, but comments are basically things you include in your code, either to help you or to help someone else that might look after your code. So you might be wondering why comments are actually important. Well, think about the size of programs or code we've written so far are pretty small. We've just written a few lines. But even with that, when you scale up, when you start going higher, you're writing other programs and doing other things. You might find that you're writing thousands of codes, or your code is interacting in different ways, right? So comments are basically just to help you know what exactly is happening, right? And this is important because if you write a piece of software today and come back in like maybe a month's time, you might find yourself struggling to remember why you did this exact, because in coding there are different ways to do different things, right? For this task there are like five, six, seven, there are tons of ways to do the task. So you might be wondering, why did I pick this way over this way? Why did I do it this way? And if you didn't put comments for yourself or for someone else that might read the code, you would actually spend a lot of time trying to remember why you wrote the code or what this particular piece of code is supposed to do. So it's a good practice to include comments. That doesn't mean you have to write comments for everything. For example, if I write this is a console log, this is actually would I say relevant? It's apparent that this is a console log, right? So you need to be liberal with comments. Use them when you need to. Use them when something might be a bit confusing. Why did you do this? Or what is this thing supposed to do? When we get to functions later, you find out that that's usually where you use comments a lot. Okay, this is a function that does this or that does that, right? So there are two ways to write comments in JavaScript. The first is with forward slashes, two double forward slash, and what this does is it puts a comment. It's a single line comment, so this means it will only comment a single line. If I type something under, this is no longer a comment, right? So you can use this for comments, short comments. It's going to basically comment from the starting point to the end. That it doesn't have to be the start of the sentence. For example, I can put a comment here and it still works. So one thing to understand about comments is that comments are entirely for the humans, right? Humans being either you or someone else that's going to go through your code. The comments that you put are not interpreted or passed by your compiler, your system, your browser, depending on whatever language you're using. But the comments basically just gets ignored. And if you check this, when we go back to our browser, you would see that it's still the same. It doesn't show any of those comments that we wrote. Why? Because like I said, the comments are only for the human, so you would only see the comment in the source code, right? But it doesn't do anything in the actual program. It's just like tips and sticky notes. Think of them as sticky notes. All right, so this is single line comment, and in case you have a comment that spans multiple lines, you can also use this for multi-line comments. Right, so this is a multi-line comment. So depending on how lengthy your comment needs to be, you could go with single or multi-line. Another important or another way people use comments is to let's call it hide or delete a part of the code. So let's say you've written this code, right, and you're trying to test something else, but you don't want to delete this entire thing so you won't forget or you won't like lose it. You can simply comment it out, and then it no longer does anything. It's basically just a comment, and comments get ignored. So this is a good way, or it's a popular way of debugging, looking for errors or bugs in your program. So I just wanted to go over that real quick. So now the first thing we're going to do is store our name in a variable. We talked about different ways of initializing or declaring variables, and we'll just use let's. So this works, and this is good enough for the first part of the task. Let my name equals Jeffrey Ogle, right? We haven't actually done anything. We just created a variable my name. We're not displaying it. So if we go back to our browser, nothing shows, right? But this is the first part. Store your name in a variable, which we've done, and then you can for the courses, basically the same thing. I talked about an array. Basically, you use square brackets to denote an array, and then you can fill it with whatever courses you're doing. So something like this would work, right? So depending on the amount of courses you're doing, you can keep filling the array as much as you want. Of course, everybody's doing different number of courses, so this part is not really about what is inside. It's just to test your ability to use arrays and properly fill it with values. Then for displaying the name, all we need to do is console log my name, and then this shows, right? So because the task was not specific about what format to display it, it's fine if you just show the name. Some people also use something a bit more descriptive. For example, my name is something like this, so that you would have this, which is also fine. So just to explain this, this is concatenation, and concatenation is just joining two things together, like gluing two things together. And since my name is a string, that string basically a set of or number of characters, I can also have another string which is this my name is, and add it to the variable. So what this does is it joins the two together, right? It's called concatenation. Another way of doing this would be by string interpolation, which does something like this. And basically works the same way. So what this does is this is like substituting, because in this case we have to put a plus here, which is well, you may or may not like it, but like I said, there are different ways of doing the same thing. So string interpolation, for variables you use a dollar sign and then enclose the variables in curly brackets, and then you can just fix it in your normal string. The only caveat is that for interpolation you have to use backticks. Backticks are this is this. It's actually different from apostrophe, single or double apostrophe. They're all different. So all of this can be used to represent strings, but only backticks can be used for interpolation. So if you try to do this, it will just show it. Yeah, so shows an error here, but actually what it's going to do is just show exactly what you typed. So strings are basically supposed to show exactly what you typed, right? Exactly what's there. It's like copy paste, garbage in, garbage out. So whatever you put in the string is whatever shows. So if you try to do this, or if you put my name here, it's going to just print literally my name. But if you want to do interpolation that substitutes a value into the string, then you can use this. It's actually a really nice feature, and this is normally my preferred way of displaying variables, especially if I have to interpolate or if I have to show something else, maybe put it in a sentence. This is my favorite way of doing it. So either way works. You could just console log the name. Anyway, it's fine. So as long as I see something, I see that you stored your name in a variable and you displayed your name somehow, then it's perfect. So I'll just delete this and we'll go with the second. Then the next part was to display courses, and you can also do the same thing here, and we interpolate our course array. Sorry, that was an error. Right, so and then it shows this my courses. Sorry, my courses are HTML, CSS, JavaScript. This is fine. Some people also use loops to loop the courses. Also fine. The main idea is set your courses in an array and also display. Then going to the more difficult part, which says based on the number of courses you're doing, if it's an odd number of courses, then display all the odd numbers from 1 to 200. If it's an even number of courses, then display all the even numbers from 1 to 200. So first of all, I'm going to, I can literally count this. This is 3, right? And 3 is an odd number, so I can have my array I less than equal to 200, I plus plus, and then check if it's divisible if there's a remainder after dividing by 2. So I'll explain this shortly, but doing that, we should get all our odd numbers, right? We have all our odd numbers. So you can put this in an array. You can put the odd numbers in an array first and then display the entire array after. Still works. It's still fine. So I'm just going to briefly explain what exactly is happening here. So this is a for loop. A for loop is just one type of loop, but for starters, a loop is basically a repetition of a certain set of a certain block of code. So you notice that okay, you're going to need to do something like this a particular amount of times. Then you just use a loop. And um, the syntax is like language, right? So the syntax for loop is I think not really language, more like structure. Syntax is more like structure. The structure of a for loop, this particular type of for loop is first you set your loop control variable. So this is what will control the loop and make sure it doesn't go on forever. We start at 0 and then we have a condition. This condition is checked every time the loop repeats. So this is the make or break condition, right? Without this, the loop will continue going infinitely. So the condition is to check if the particular number we're on is still less than or equal to 200. This is always going to return either true or false, and if it's true, then it continues the loop. If it's false, then it terminates the loop. And then we have an incrementer here, something that needs to increase, because imagine if we just had we started our loop at 0, we're testing if it's less than or equal to 200, and we didn't have this. That means the variable, the loop control variable will always be 0 because there's nothing that is increasing it, and 0 is always going to be less than 200, so that's still going to give us an infinite loop. So basically there are three important things for your loop. You need you need a condition, right? You need something to check if the loop should still continue, and you need a way to make sure that whatever you're checking has a point where it will no longer be true, and that can only be possible if that value is changing. So if I doesn't change, then this condition will always return, the loop will always continue. I hope that makes sense. So this loop is going to actually repeat 200 times, but just repeating 200 times is not good enough. We're trying to show only the odd numbers. So if we just display the number, if we just display the number without putting like another check, it will just show all numbers from 1 to 200, which isn't what we're supposed to do. So to check if a number is odd, usually how you in actual sense, like if I was going to ask you, if I gave you a number, a random number, say 93, and I asked you if it's odd or even, what you're going to do is basically try to divide it by 2, because all even numbers when divided by 2 give you 0. There's no remainder after dividing by 2. So by default, all odd numbers have a remainder, actually 1. They have a remainder of 1 when divided by 2, right? So here I'm checking if the current number, which is I, and this funny symbol here looks like it looks like the normal division sign in mathematics, but this is modulo, and what it does is it gives you the remainder after division. So if I was going to do 5 divided by 2, for example, it wouldn't tell me 2.5, it would tell me 1, because that's the remainder after dividing 5 by 2. I hope that makes sense. So here I'm checking if the remainder after dividing the number by 2 is equal to 1. If it's equal to 1, that means it's an odd number, and that means it's something I should display, because I'm trying to display all the odd numbers. Another way of doing this could be if I modulo 2 is not equals to is not equal to 0. This is like the opposite, right? So here I'm checking if the remainder is equal to 1, and the second one I'm checking if the remainder is equal to 0. Both of them will actually do the same thing. So it doesn't matter which one you're using, as long as your condition is sound, it's going to still do the same thing. You might be asking why there is no else condition. Because okay, usually when you have an if condition, if you think about it in the actual sense, when you tell someone, or when you're using if something is this, then do this, otherwise do that. So that's basically the structure of if else. Normally, if you have an if condition, you would attach an else, that if this thing is not true, what should I do, right? But in this case, we're not actually concerned with where it's not true. We're only interested in the cases where it's odd. So as long as it's odd, we are fine. Do this. We don't need to provide any other scenario for when it's not odd. If we needed to do something with the even numbers as well, then we could have that in the else condition. But since we're not interested in that, there's no need for this. So just this is fine. And like we saw already, the task, this my browser on console, it does display my name, it displays my courses, and then it displays the odd number. So if you did this, you basically completed the task as expected. Of course, if I had even numbers, I would just flip this to 0, right? And then this shows even numbers. So what I'm doing here is, I know the number of courses I'm doing is even. I'm just changing my test condition to say if the particular number I'm on is divisible by 2, that there's no remainder, the remainder is 0, then print it, because only even numbers will give you a remainder of 0 when you divide by 2. So this is how I'll display even numbers. So if you did any of this for odd or even, then you were almost completely correct. In fact, you were actually correct, but there's just one thing: the code is not scalable. Like I said, or like I just showed, when my courses became even, I had to also change this. So if I take this back to odd, for example, or if I made a mistake, maybe I miscounted for some reason, this would show me even numbers, even though my number of courses is odd. So it's a bit cumbersome to have to always change this whenever I modify my array. So for you to have for you to get full marks on this task, or for the people that got full marks, and I know a lot of people were asking where did my 0.1 go, or why didn't I get full marks in the particular task? It was because of this condition, although it works for this particular case, is not robust. Robust in the sense that since the task actually told you there were 2 possibilities, the code only checks for one. You're assuming here in this particular case, even though you're writing code to do everything, you are counting the number of courses by yourself. I'll take that again. So basically, for me to know that these were odd, or this is like, sorry, the number of courses are odd, I counted them myself. There's nothing in my code that actually shows that I checked if this was odd in some way, right? The same thing for when I've made them even. So ideally, what you should have is a check, something that actually checks if the number of courses are even or odd, and then it accurately shows either odd numbers or even numbers. If you did anything like that, it doesn't matter how you did it, but if you did something like that, you had full marks. So to do that, first we need to talk about an array method called .length. So there's an array method called .length that's attached to all arrays. You don't need to create it. Whenever you create an array, it has a .length property, and this property is basically the number of elements in the array. If we go back to this, you will see that it says 3, and if I change this to PHP, sorry, I attach something else, the number of courses actually changes to 4, right? So with this, I never have to worry about manually counting, because okay, what if there were 1,000 courses in here? I would have to count them manually each time, and then what if maybe someone came to update my code later and then it took out 2 courses? Then when I come back, I would have to count again, like it would be 998 at that point, but I'll have to count it to know that it's 998, assuming I didn't use this, right? So this is a very helpful way to always check, accurately check how many elements are contained in your array. Now, since we now know that you can get the number of elements in your array using the .length property, it becomes a bit easier, because we can always check if the length is even or odd, and then display even or odd numbers accurately. So one way to do that would be, we don't need to console log this again. One way to do that would be to attach an if condition here and say if my course.length modulo 2 is equal to 0. So it's basically still the same way you check for even numbers. If the course.length is divisible by 2, that's 0, that means it's an even number. And then I can attach my for loop in here. I can take my loop into this block, right? So now whenever my the length of my courses is an even number, it would automatically do this, right? And you can see this still works. Then there were some people that actually did this, but this is still not a complete solution. Basically, this is not really any better than the person that didn't even. Okay, it's slightly better because here you're actually checking for the length of the courses programmatically, but it still doesn't account for when the course becomes odd. If I change this to an odd number of courses, this would still show me. Sorry, this wouldn't even show me anything, right? Because they are odd courses, and this condition is only for even courses. So this brings us to the else statement I talked about earlier, where you can have an if statement, you check for one thing, and then if that particular thing was not true, you have an else statement. Okay, so it's like, if this is true, do this, else do this, right? So the else condition is basically what executes when your if condition is false. And else, basically else don't have any condition attached, because there are only two. Whenever you put a condition, there are only two outcomes: true or false. Something is either true or it's false. It can't be both, or it can't be any other thing. They are boolean, they are distinct values. So if this was already true, there's nothing, we don't need to check for anything else. Although there's another form where you can say else if, in case you want to check for multiple things, you can use else if and then attach a condition and then check for whatever you want to check. But in this case, we're only checking for two things: is it odd or is it even, and then we do something based on that. So here within my else condition, I will have a similar loop, except I will change this to 1. So with this, if I have an odd number of courses, it actually shows me odd numbers. And if I put an even number of courses, then this changes to even numbers. Our solution is robust, so we can guarantee that it doesn't matter what course you put, like the number of courses, it will always accurately show you either odd or even, which is very much in line with this, right? So this is actually a perfect solution to, not really a perfect solution, but this is something that completely solves the task, but it's not really optimal. Why? We have two things that are almost very similar, this and this. The code is too bulky, so here we are going to reduce. Actually, we're just going to cut all of this off and try to solve this another way. So here we've actually solved the task. Now we're trying to optimize it or reduce the amount of things we're doing. And one thing you can think about is, if you read this again, it says if the number of courses you're doing is odd, then display all odd numbers, and if the number of courses you're doing is even, then display all even numbers. So one thing to notice is that even your odd number of courses is still contained within these odd numbers, right? The same way you check for odd number, the same way you test if the number of courses you're taking is odd, is the same way you would test if any other number is odd, right? So we can say that the remainder after division of your course.length is going to be the same as, if it's an odd number, it's going to be the same as all other odd numbers. I'll say that again. So we have in this we have 4 courses here, right? And the course.length of this is going to be 4. If we do 4 modulo 2, it's going to give us 0. That's the remainder after dividing 4 by 2 is 0, right? And all other even numbers are going to give us the same thing. If you flip it for odd numbers, assuming this number of courses were odd, right? When you divide this by 2, the remainder is going to be 1. And if you divide any other odd number by 2, it's also going to be 1. So what you can do here is, we can actually use just one loop, right? This is our basic loop. We can use one loop, and then inside here, what we will check for is if my course.length is equal to, my course.length modulo 2 is equals to I modulo 2. and then equal sole of I. So if we check this, it should work as expected. 3 courses, all odd numbers, and if you change this to 4 courses, then this is also even number. So just in case you didn't really understand how this is working, here what we're doing is we're checking if the length of the courses is odd. Remember that if length of the courses is odd, the remainder is going to be 1. But if any other number is odd, the remainder is also going to be 1. So basically we're trying to say if the remainder after dividing the number of courses is the same as the remainder after dividing this particular number, then show the number. So all odd numbers will give you the same remainder, and all even numbers will give you the same remainder. I hope that makes sense. I'll just take it again. Basically what we're doing is we're checking if the remainder after dividing the number of courses is also the same remainder after dividing our particular number. And we know that this is going to work because if our number of courses is odd, it's going to give us the same remainder as any other number. And if the number of our courses is even, it's going to give us the same remainder as any other number. So once these two match, once both of them have the same remainder, that means they are both odd or they are both even. And since our task is basically to show all odd numbers if the number of courses is odd, and all even numbers if the number of courses is even, then this works perfectly. So you can see we just have one loop and it still functions exactly as expected. So if you did anything that you don't have to use this particular solution, right? Some people still have the course array and they push to the array and display the array after, that's fine. But if you were able to check for the number of courses being odd or even and then show either odd or even numbers, you had full marks. If you couldn't do that but you still correctly showed your own odd numbers, like if your courses were odd and you showed the odd numbers, you also had your really high score, but that was where your 0.1 went to. So I hope that was clear enough.